Hey, Andrew.
Hey, two. And hey, everyone. We're the co founders of Cleverific, and we've been working together since 2009. After 10 years of working on Cleverific and over 12,392 customers, we're excited to sit down with you and share what we've learned over the years.
Yeah, today we wanted to talk about how we met, what we were doing at the very beginning, how we got to working on Cleverific, and what we've been doing for the last 10 years here.
Let's get into it.
Andrew and I met around 2009 when a mutual friend of ours introduced us because he wanted someone to work on a photo project. And at the time, we had just recently had a terrible fire that went through Santa Barbara. And what happened was a lot of people lost all of their photos, basically all their belongings. And he asked us if we could work on this project where we would build this app that would ask the community to collect what photos they had of their friends and share it in a way that these people who were affected by the fire could retain some of their history.
You know, it feels like ages ago, but it also feels almost like yesterday, too. When we were connected together, you and I started just trying to figure out, hey, how are we going to collaborate? How do we work together? What do we each bring to the table here? And two, as a designer, was able to bring a lot of the creative side, a lot of the visual side there. And I worked as primarily a web application developer and also designing basically the UX around web applications in particular. We really quickly found out that we complemented each other very well to build a whole and complete product. And then we also found out that we basically read the same types of books. As we would get together on a week by week basis to share our progress, to make decisions, we also would exchange books with each other. And it was kind of the business books at the time and the kind of the inspirational books at the time. So a lot of Seth Godin books, a lot of things around, say, potentially like lean startup, things like that. And as we kind of shared this knowledge together, we kind of started forming a very healthy and collaborative working relationship.
It's been a long time since Seth Godin books for me.
Yeah.
I think I started with The Prize Inside, if I recall correctly. Blink was up. Was it Blink? Blink. Um, was one of them as well. And they were quick reads, and we were, I think at the time too, pretty voracious readers where we would swap books. I think this was weekly, and proud to say that we actually read through the books that the other person handed versus just kind of put it on a shelf and run through the cliff notes, right? And just kind of that deep relationship building of like, hey, a book club, our very own little book club here that we didn't realize that we were forming, really helped us have conversations about what we wanted to build, what that would look like on a broader scale than just the little project that we were working on. So, we had some ideas of, hey, not only were we just talking about like what we wanted to build here, but also if we had a business, what that would look like and how would these books apply to that and so on and so forth. So those early conversations really built, I don't know, what is it, like over 15 years now, a relationship where we still talk every single day and we have dedicated weekly coffees where we still talk about a broad range of things.
What I think is pretty interesting about the types of books that we would exchange, it was all over the board. And some of them became eventually these types of foundational ideas and books that we would make sure that people who worked with us or joined our team, we would make sure that they would read that too. One of the big ones, for example, is this book by Steve Krug called Don't Make Me Think. It's a UX book and also mentions like user testing as well. We make everyone on our team read that book. And it's about really keeping towards this idea of being in service to the user and helping lead them to exactly what's going to make them most successful in the application. And for our software. And I think there's those things that we shared with each other, but also we shared with each other, I think, books that are kind of beyond what you might think of as, like web or just what you would think about like web application design. I remember reading it was important to me at the time, this typography book. And it was about basically everything you needed to know about typography. And I think one of the advantages of that is that Tu and I have always had a good foundation in shared language for how we discuss what happens in the app, how things are supposed to look and feel and what needs to change. Tu could use, real design language that she would normally only use with like a printer or a typesetter type person, with me, and I know exactly what she means. That could translate directly into changes to app or the project that we happen to be working on.
I worked with a lot of developers and I was so excited when I met Andrew and had someone that was closer to being on the same page as myself, being to the consultants. One of the things that's most important in any relationship is commitment to what we agreed on and to deliver what we agreed on. And that's critical when you're trusting your own clients with someone new, right? As well as Andrew sharing his clients with me, where before, to be honest, I was burnt with people who didn't deliver what they promised. And then I would show up to a meeting having to explain why something wasn't done. And that was a very terrible experience, to be honest. And to find someone that, hey, when we're committed to working on something together, there's something that's due on Monday or Wednesday, we show up together and we deliver what we promised. And if not, the most critical thing too is that if we don't, we're honest with each other so that we can prepare or let clients or merchants know that it's not going to happen now, but recognize it and we can move this meeting to another time in the week, or we just need a few more days, whatever it was, so that we could honor our commitments and be honest and upfront with the people that we were working for. And I think that outside of removing that friction was such a relief, like personally for me.
As Stu and I were working on this project around, it was the T fire in Santa Barbara is the fire that she was referring to there. So we had this kind of T fire project that we were working on, and very quickly, through that collaboration, figured out that we actually worked really well together. And so we decided, like, hey, we should just do more projects together. In the beginning, it was us passing projects back and forth to each other, right? If two needed a developer for a project, she would bring me on board. And then if I needed a designer for a project, I'd bring her on board as well. And really entrusting each other with the client work and to collaborate together. What's really fun and interesting about that is that it gives you a lot of shots on goal, in that we had a lot of projects that we had to deliver end to end together. And we were kind of a power team there, right? Where, because I'm a completely full stack developer, I could do everything from server DevOps level all the way up the stack to like CSS and front end coding. And then two could handle actually everything on the design end, right? Whether it is web, print, packaging, what have you there. So between the both of us, we could get a lot done for clients there. And it was an exhilarating time in that we could do project after project and refine our process as we did it. And finally dawned on us, hey, we should maybe start a company together. Maybe we should make this official here. And it was actually in, I want to say 2012. So a solid maybe 3 years when we finally incorporated Cleverific. To do what? We didn't quite know yet. All we knew is that we wanted to eventually have a software as a service product. In the meantime, we had been doing all this e-commerce work. Two had been working with Johnson & Johnson, and we were product and mentor, and we were brought in for kind of a rescue project there. We were working with some local fashion brands and shoe brands in Santa Barbara, and building basically their very first kind of e-commerce systems out. And that's how we started to develop this knowledge and competency in the Shopify ecosystem. And this was maybe around 2009, or probably at that point 2010, 2011. When we incorporated in 2012, the idea was to build a software as a service company, but to bridge that gap between having a product and not having a product with agency style work. So we continued the process there with client work until we got to a product level thing where we could focus full time on that.
When we started working, or at least definitely when I started working in the space, there were Magento e-commerce backends. They were custom backends that I think, like, I worked on e-commerce site that was full custom code, and I believe it was being served out of someone's like house or closet or even office at the time. I think it was. I mean, the early days were pretty crunchy that way.
That was like a cold fusion site or something. That
Yeah,
was
right. So, yeah, so I mean, it was that down dirty. And, as a designer, sometimes people would come with what their tech already. And so I was just designing on top of these systems that were basically like an education for me, right? And really kind of understanding what I could and couldn't do with my design, and also what I couldn't do with the specific developer that I was working with. When Andrew and I started, I think that we explored Shopify pretty early. I actually don't recall working on a non-Shopify site back in like 2012.
yeah, yeah. It was all Shopify at that point.
It was still the early days of Shopify as well, but I think that when we found Shopify, we were really convincing everyone that we possibly knew that this is the system and this is the e-commerce software they should be using for their business. We were pushing it pretty hard, and it was the early days of Shopify where it was pretty exciting what they were doing for sure.
When we were working with CVs, a local shoe company here in town, I don't recall actually installing very many apps, or if any, at the time at all. The Shopify App Store was released, they came out in like 2009, so it was fairly early, and it was pretty light for a good while, I would say. So there is a lot of build out that I did personally, and a lot of build out for things that you would think would already be in the platform, but weren't yet. And even for Shopify, they didn't have abandoned cart emails yet. I'm pretty sure. So it took a while before even API availability was actually that widespread enough to start to go in there and do something interesting with the platform.
What we did know, and why we were pushing it as well, is that definitely could get an e-commerce site up much quicker with Shopify than anything else that definitely I had worked with. And Andrew, you probably would say the same thing. Even without like the apps at the time, what we were working with there allowed brands to get up much quicker than the old cycle. I don't even remember like how long sites took, to be honest. It seemed like it took a lot longer than it should have, but again, that was more than 15 years ago, so it's a little blurry.
Yeah, it definitely, that was one of the reasons that we definitely were pushing. I remember working on like Magento sites and other types of e-commerce platforms. I think Spree was another one. That was an open source one. For the bigger brands that we were working with at the time, I had a pager system set up in order to make sure that we caught any issues that potentially were going to be a problem before they got big. And I developed one of those phantom phone buzzing things in my leg because I had so many alerts going to my phone. And the promise of Shopify was that we could basically, not do that, right? There were a lot of asks from the brands that we work with at the time, and a lot of things that we, kind of set up specifically that was like bespoke code that potentially Shopify could handle for us there. And when we finally moved over to Shopify, especially for a lot of those other brands, I think a good number of those problems went away. And I remember counseling various brands that we would be talking to, especially somebody who might have, say, a brand owner who was a little bit more technical minded, right? And he said, oh yeah, couldn't I just stand this up over here on the server and then just let it go? And I'm like, no, you don't want to do that, because you don't want to spend time administering servers. You should be spending time growing your brand. Thankfully, did what I told him to do and has never looked back from there.
Reminds me of us convincing, outside of even just e-commerce, like quite a few of our mutual clients, that they were not software companies, and this was a very bad idea.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple of companies that we, advise not to be. It wasn't really their foray there, right? It's like, you're a medical company, you shouldn't be doing that.
So we wanted to work on a project together. We knew it was some kind of SaaS, but outside of that, we really, when we first started to say that we wanted to work on a project together, we really had no idea what industry, what category, what anything like that was. We just knew that we just wanted to work on a product together that required no client, if you will, right? We talked about a photo app a little bit because it kind of segue from the pro bono stuff that we were working on. And we loosely talked about potentially very, very early on, like a wholesale app. And part of this was from my history prior to going on my own. I worked as an art director for a shoe company. And in the early days of my freelance, I worked for a lot of different brands, building, tech packs and like one sheets and sales material, and I kind of do the entire process there. At the time, there was a lot to be worked on, or a lot to even digitize at that moment. We loosely talked about these things, but we never really settled on anything. And I think we went around for a few years just kind of noodling on some ideas.
I remember those years. This is, somewhere between 2012 and to 2015 here. During those years, we were actively working on a SaaS product idea, right? And two threw out a couple of examples there. But we would have sketches here and there, build something, see if it would work. A lot of spaghetti against the wall types of things there. In the meantime, we're also, making a living here, right? And so it's really hard to work on a SaaS product where you're building up recurring revenue while you're trying to live in Santa Barbara as well. And so we relied a lot on client work to do that, right? To bring money in the door there. Client work would always win out over work on the product. It's really hard to be able to focus on both at the same time when you could get billable hours tomorrow, basically. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts at the time, and one of them was very influential for me, which was this podcast by Rob Walling, Startups for the Rest of Us. And he described his entrepreneurial journey to founding a company called Drip, and is this idea of a stair-step approach to entrepreneurship, in that you start small, maybe you start with something that you acquire, and then you kind of build up from there. You basically exercise that muscle of running a company, doing the sales, doing marketing, building, and really moving forward to some of these bigger swings that you might take there. And at the same time, somebody who in that community who I had also been reading a lot from, he had put his app up for sale. He had started a service and then, put it up for sale through another broker. And I said, well, actually, maybe we don't have to build anything from scratch. Maybe we could acquire something that already has revenue. And that was mind blowing for us because Tu and I, software engineer, designer, we're like product people, right? Like the creative people as far as the way I see it. And so I had always assumed that if you're going to start something, it has to be something that started from scratch, it's born in your dreams, and then you get out there and you make it a reality. This kind of turned all of that, on its head. And I just started just as an exercise, I would just look at what was available out there. And then one day I found this app that edits orders for sale, and it had some revenue. And I said, actually, this could be a thing. We know this space. It's in Shopify. It's in the Shopify App Store. And it's a problem that we know, and it's also a problem space and an ecosystem that we know really well. And I brought it to Tu. It was, I said, hey, here's an opportunity for us here, and we could take this and then run with it, and then maybe at the time it was like, hey, Tu, like, let's take this, let's run with this, and then because this already has revenue, we could grow the revenue a little bit and then work on our real product, right? Come up with a better product instead. And what it turned out to be is that we rapidly doubled after the acquisition of the app. We took it in, kind of turned it around from the issues that it had before, which is that, starting to get a bunch of one-star reviews. I think some of those one-star reviews still affect us today. I'm not sure what the algorithm looks like now, but we rapidly doubled it a couple of times. It turns out that editing orders on Shopify, and actually anything to do with the order space on Shopify, is super interesting. And we've actually just kept at it instead. So we didn't need to build anything else because the opportunities and the problem space is so big and interesting.
Hindsight, it was kind of funny how we just ended up in a space that we've been in for like 10 years, but it literally started out as let's work on, like Andrew said, let's work on this together. And I don't know that I spent even more than a day thinking about it when he proposed it. I think it was like, let me think about it. Sure, why not? Right. Like, talked about it enough to where I think like we both felt like, hey, if we're going to do this, we should do this and stop talking about it. And this was a very easy way to just do it, because as soon as we said yes, like there was a product there were customers that needed, emails answered, and you just had to dive in, right? Like you didn't need to kick the can down the road like anymore because now the store was open and you had to show up for work. So we said, yes, we were going to do this. And meanwhile, we still both had like full-time jobs when we committed to this. So the first thing we did that we knew we had to do was we had to find like a customer service person to like help field these emails that came in because we couldn't be like in the inbox immediately. And also it's something that we deeply care about. And I would say like, honestly, it's something we deeply care about to this day. We honor the commitments that we have for people and also that they trust us with running their business, whether it's a client or a merchant, is that we deeply care that we keep them up and running and going and successful. Earlier on, it was more like, okay, well, we're just going to dive in the deep end and figure it out as we go. And have to say that there was a lot more that we didn't know. Hindsight, 100%, we are still all, like constantly like learning and growing for sure. But in the first days, I definitely remember thinking, all right, we have this thing now. I guess I work on this still like a little bit every single day, just like any other client. This happens to be the one that answers to me, but I still had to allocate like a certain amount of time during the week or the day to kind of get this thing where we weren't sure exactly where it was going yet. The first thing that had to be done was the code had to be cleaned up. So luckily for me, that was mainly Andrew digging around and getting his feet wet in the depths of the code for a few months there at least, or half a year. But in the meantime, we could just focus on some small things on the design side. But yeah, it started from there, just kind of trying to figure out what we just acquired and what shape it was in. And yeah, like Andrew mentioned, some people were already frustrated, pretty proud that we turned around like some customer successes relatively quickly just from people knowing that we were there and that we were real and that we responded to them. That was like the first sign, I think, of like for me that I felt like successful and that we actually had a product.
It took a couple of years before we were able to work full time on this. Like we were still doing client work while during the acquisition, after the acquisition. It was a solid couple of years there, right? And it was a big juggling act between the two there, right? And because we didn't have funding, and actually, Tu and I, when we started, and then when we went into when we into the acquisition of Edit Order of the app in 2015, we had a sit down conversation with each other and we wanted to talk about how we see ourselves running this company and what it's going to look like going forward, right? And we had just come off an experience where we were working with a client together. It was not an e-commerce build, but it was a web application build. We basically built V1 of a tech company for them, and they were heavily trying to get me to join them as CTO and just go all in on the company. Now, they eventually, they right before I had to make any too big of a decisions there, they actually just ran out of money. And so that happened there. And it was kind of off the heels of that experience, our experience working with other venture funded companies, or at least, early stage funded companies there. When we sat down there, we had kind of a ground rule that like, hey, we would never take funding for this, for Cleverific, that we would be an entirely bootstrapped company there. And we wanted to be a bootstrapped company so that we could grow at the pace that we wanted to grow at. And not to say that it wasn't ambitious. We had we're extraordinarily ambitious. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been starting a company here, right? But because we wanted to build a company that not only served our customers and served our merchants, but also served our lifestyle as well. Helped us become the people that we wanted to be and live the lives that we wanted to live as well, rather than consistently chase after an investor return there. It was really important for us to have that kind of conversation. And then in those early days, really form how we worked in the company together and then where it was going to go.
I think that's a key thing that people definitely that we've talked to that have asked us throughout the years, like, hey, how's it working with a partner, and how did you start this, and how are you still here, and haven't broke up after 10 years of being in a business relationship? Because I will tell you that our business lawyers basically run on the fact that businesses break up, right? That's literally what the legal system is there for when it comes to businesses. And how do you avoid that? In what Andrew said, it's kind of critical that we were very aligned on what we wanted this business to do for us personally, right? And we live in Santa Barbara. It's not a tech hub. It's like a very, very small town, even though it has a lot of like tech in it. We didn't move to bigger places to seek out bigger opportunities because we wanted to balance it with like what we did when we're not at work, right? And for me, it's everything in the kitchen sink, creative wise. And earlier on, I definitely had mentioned that like one of the goals that I would love to see in the business is that we get to a 4-day work week. I think I said it multiple times in the early years, although that's not where we started. And it's definitely not where I was at when I was freelancing, because I would definitely be working 21 days straight to hit like client deadlines. My husband will be the first to say that come day 22, I'm a complete ogre and I can't do this anymore. And there had to be a different way to do this. But, like we get to take all the things that we learned from running our separate businesses, what we did like, what we didn't like, the crazy hours, the inconsistency, and to kind of put all of our ideas into the business that we wanted to build. It goes back to the days where we're talking about, hey, what do we want to build? It wasn't just the product, it was a company around the product. And I don't know that people have those conversations enough. They definitely talk about like what they want to build and like the money that they want to make on so on and so forth. But like, what does that look like when it comes to the actual journey and the day-to-day like work-life balance? A lot of people talk about that, but it's really hard to deliver on that for sure, especially when you're a startup. It's a difficult like balance. For us running our own separate companies and then trying to build an app, like we definitely didn't meet those goals in the early days, but we definitely wanted to work towards those goals.
And I don't know if you recall, but like, we had some other goals too. One of the goals was that we wanted to make this a type of company where we could work from wherever, right? And or anywhere around the world, because our goal is just be traveling all the time. Eventually, we ended up in an office together because we thought it'd be fun. And it was fun until COVID happened and we moved out of the office. And we are like, actually, it's really great to be at home with our cats. And so I wanted to stay at home with my cat. And so, we never moved back into an office. But, when I look back on this time here over the last 10 years, just with the personal growth and like all the things that we've learned here on the job, or like in the work that we do and in the ecosystem and just generally around like SaaS businesses and the business model and everything. You can't trade that for anything, I feel like. And then on top of that, I also had like such big personal wins, right? Because like when I think about all the training I did to go and win like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Championship in 2018, and it was because we had built this company that allowed me to do and put in the type of training that I wanted to put in. I was training, multiple times a day in order to get there over the course of, 6 to 8 months or something like that. And, finally won it in December of that year. It was a pretty big achievement there, and something that, for a sport that I've been doing my entire life there. And all that's because of the work that we put into this business here.
When we started out thinking about what we wanted for a business, we also at the time had some life goals that we wanted to check off. Andrew with his judo and jujitsu, and myself with we talked about a little bit before where we did want to travel, but the way I like to travel is I like to stay in one place for long enough to get into the place, not just be a partial visitor. And I was also able to do that rather recently with my year and a half abroad in Portugal and the UK. And that was a life experience that I would not have had without having these conversations with Andrew first on like, even if this was doable, if it was like, how realistic is it for a business? And what does that look like when we got into it? And how we made that work. We had to agree on some basic guidelines. Like I had to shift my personal schedule around because I was the one that was moving. So I made sure that I was with the team half the day. So that meant that I had to work some nights. And that's the trade-off if I'm going to be the one going off somewhere to do this thing. And then still, I think halfway into being in, I don't know if at the time, if I was in Portugal or the UK, I asked like, I'm willing to ask the hard question. And the hard question was like, was this working for Andrew? And if he saw a difference in, my work productivity or the fact that, I was async half the day. And you have to be able to have or willing to jump in and have these conversations if you want to be able to make sure that whatever decisions you're making is still relatively healthy for yourself and for the company. Like you're going to have to go and ask, like, hey, this tough question that maybe someone, like, I'm afraid that he'll say it sucks and I'll have to think about like how to move home. I don't know, but be able to be honest with yourself on saying, hey, let's just bring this up before it becomes an issue. Even if you think it's fine, like I thought it was fine at the time, but just because I think something is fine, that doesn't mean that Andrew thinks it's fine without me actually explicitly asking him if this is fine, if it's working for you. If he says yes or no, then we deal with that at the time, but like making sure that you ask like the tough questions.
So right at the beginning of the business, after we acquired the product, I think we spent a lot of time, having to kind of go through and one, figure out how everything was set up, and then also, basically implementing all of the systems that we wanted to put in place in order to serve merchants really well. It was a definitely a project and the type that we laid the foundations for, I think, really well that continue to serve us to this day. For example, if I go back and look at our support systems and everything, they've definitely evolved over the years, and they've evolved for the better, and in ways that I think that the foundations really set us up for. Probably the key thing that we do that I'm very proud of as far as our support team is concerned, and maybe and somebody might look at it and say, hey, you shouldn't do that, is that we always try to be helpful. And that means answering questions and doing things or answering the questions that actually might not even be related to our app. There are so many times where we answer a question for our app, and then, this merchant figures out that, like, oh, actually, these people are very helpful and knowledgeable. And so they'll keep asking us other questions that are completely unrelated. And you know what? We'll just answer them. If we know what the answers are, then we'll answer them. Otherwise, we'll try to point you in the right direction there. And it's been the type of relationship that I think for merchants, they're getting less and less of as we go forward, as AI starts to take over chat support and even email chat. Merchants are tending to just run into a wall a lot sooner than they used to. And even in the past, you didn't always have a knowledgeable person behind the wheel there that you're actually speaking to. And we were able to grow that into a support team where both Tu and I were. Back in the day, we used to be in support probably 50% of the day, and we would hand it off back and forth to each other, so that, say, Tu could do some client work or I could get some focused work done, in the afternoons or on a week by week basis. And now these days, we have like regular issue triages where we'll look at any issues that are potentially an issue. Generally, it's me doing that or one of our engineers doing that in order to surface things that merchants are bringing up. But we've been able to train, head of customer support, Laura, who maybe some of you have interacted with here, to be able to answer just about any question that's out there in Shopify. And she has taken the torch and the lead as the new person who, I say new, but she's been working with us for 4 or 5 years now, which is pretty incredible for a customer support like department there. So she's been working with us for 5 years, and she is able to answer questions in general about almost anything that's happening in Shopify. And that continues like the founding ethos that we had in how we want to support our merchants and customers of our.
I'm proud to say that Laura is more knowledgeable than I am on many things because she is in there day in and day out. And that's like one of the things that I would say that I'm 100% most proud of is like our level of support from day one and after 10 years still kind of delivering on that part of the promise. And we have a small team, but every single one of our team members have like sat the helm of customer service. Even in this past year, I spent like some time as like a when she's on vacation or just rotating into the seat so that I know like what's going on. Also having conversations with her like at least pretty much like monthly to know what's going on and to kind of keep on the pulse of that. Like one of our shining moments for me is, being able to help someone in Australia or in the UK and they love us like we're in the same time zone and it's pretty amazing. One thing I'd have to say about being jealous when Andrew like helms support is that sometimes he's able just to solve the problem right there because he's in the code and like and then I have to wait for someone to go do the thing. So I can't deliver like Andrew can. So it's a little bit of a sore spot. I'm a little jealous about that. But I'm very proud of that part of the business for sure.
Yeah, that doesn't happen as much anymore because we're working on a lot of other priorities as well. But there are definitely, probably the first 5 years of us of us working, on the app together. And building out Cleverific, there were lots of times where, I'd be emailing with somebody and within the next 15 minutes, whatever it is that they were emailing about, I had just fixed. We still do stuff like that. It's not 15 minutes, but it is more on the order of the fastest stuff that we fixed lately has been on the order of like an hour or two, even, especially when we're working with somebody who's going through our, say, VIP onboarding process. If there's anything that's happening there, then everybody on the team knows about what's the priority for getting this customer through to the next stage there. It's pretty fun when you could do that because it feels like we're all operating at the highest level there.
I think it took Andrew, what, 2 years to go full time?
That's right, 2 years.
Then it took me actually another 2 years because I know for a fact it was like 2019 when I went full time. So, like the hardest part of that was when we started Cleverific, we were at the height of our consultants. Like we were paid very well doing what we were doing. And I had been doing my own business at the time for maybe like 8 years, something like that. So I was well in my groove. And Andrew, do you recall how long you were like in your own consultancy?
Since 2008, 2009.
Yeah. So right, to a point where we had our own clients, we had everything going on. That's actually one of the conversations we did not have, which is when, how, exactly, what time were we going to go full time into this thing? And it starts off with first, it has to be able to fund both of our lives, right? Like it has to replace some of the income, maybe not all of the income, but it has to have enough to pay bills. So it had to at least like get across the first hurdle. We didn't really have a conversation about it, but I think it was only natural for dev to go first because it's a SaaS product, right? And so it just seemed like, hey, if anything, if we can afford Andrew full time, then let's start there and then eke me in sometime, right? And that's kind of where it was probably a little muddier as well. And why it took 2 years is we never really set hey, we hit this goal, this financial goal, you go full time. It took me being in a car cross country and Andrew calling me and yelling at me for not being full time before we put that conversation, actually had a real conversation about it. And it literally happened. I believe it was either in Texas or in Arkansas or one of those states with bad reception. And I'm having this conversation with Andrew where he's like, hey, you need to be in here full time. And it's like, it's now hurting us. Right. And I basically had to say, I agree. And we agreed that I would go full time. We just never had a conversation about what that exact cutoff was. And so in that conversation, we had this idea of, hey, what did it look like to you, Andrew? Like how long do you want it to take me to exit out of not just my company, but this other agency that I was part of that also already had like employees. So I couldn't just go, hey, I quit tomorrow, right? I run this company. I run it with a partner. I need to be able to transition the things that I was working on to my other partner and make sure that I leave that company in good hands when I go full time here. And I think that took 3 months when we decided it was time to go and for me to get out of there. So that's kind of what it took to kind of get in the business full time. Is it's one of the conversations we did not have that we eventually had to have. It took like, I believe at that point in time, then 4 years for both of us to be full time. Now, that being said, I think we had two other full time employees at the time, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so there were other people in business with Andrew, and he was kind of in there alone. And that's why it was like high time for me to actually be in there and do also some of the partial admin, like heavy lifting as well. That's kind of how we got to full time after 4 years. Was we didn't have a very good timeline for it, and we didn't really define what the goals were or what the stretch goals were for that to happen. So interestingly enough, when we had the office together, I actually sat in the office full time already. So in presence, I was in the office with Cleverific full time. And my other company, funnily enough, was in the office upstairs from ours. And so I would work downstairs for the other company that was upstairs, but actually sit in the office of Cleverific full time. So I didn't actually have to do anything physical per se, and it didn't feel different, like because I was always in the office. And so Andrew and I could have these conversations that would happen naturally in any office, like water cooler talk, or go grab a snack in the break room. And we were able to have these conversations all day long. So when we transitioned to full time, like physically, it didn't feel like a change, but I think the momentum changed a little bit because now, like, we were free to have like more future setting goals, knowing that we were here, like, or I was here completely, and now there's two of us.
That was my feeling and recollection of the time as well. It just felt more like, okay, now we have more hands with paddles now, right? To really go and make a splash there. We could just get more done sooner and faster. Looking back, we could have, and you always never, it's only in hindsight that you kind of know that, but both of us, we could have we could have transitioned to full time sooner than we did. But in the moment there, you only look at the uncertainties, right? We only have the benefit of hindsight to go back and look back. Oh yeah, we should have gone full time, maybe immediately, or maybe a year or two sooner at least, right? 2019 was kind of like like a somewhat momentous year. When I look back at 2019, there's two going full time into the business at that point, and then Shopify had finally announced that, hey, they're going to build a order editing API. And there we are. We're an app that facilitates order editing on Shopify. At a time on Shopify, you couldn't edit an order at all without using an app like ours. And we're the first one of that type of app ever. And you could look at this and say, okay, this is a app's worst nightmare, right? But what we looked at it as is a total opportunity, because this now enables us to do more things around allowing merchants to slice and dice their orders the way that they need to do it in order to satisfy their customer needs there. Having worked in the space for so long and developed relationships with people on the Shopify team and the product team and everything, we were solicited for use cases and lots of feedback on how the API should look and where it should go on this. We shared a lot of our data and our use cases with the developer advocates and the team over at Shopify to basically help shape the APIs into what they look like today, and then also to what we hope they would be in order to help us achieve some of the goals that we had for our merchants there and facilitate their businesses. And this is knowing that we always knew that that was going to happen, right? It's part of being and building on a platform that you have this sort of platform risk. And eventually you have to deal with a day of reckoning where, oh no, Shopify or Microsoft or Apple, whoever is going to build the thing as a feature that you've based your whole company around. However, it's all about finding those niches where you're going to be able to build moats and provide outsized value for merchants and customers that, say, a Shopify is basically never going to be able to go in and fill that space, right? Because when you think about a platform like Shopify or like even a Microsoft or an Apple, like really big companies like that, they still have to build for the 80% use case, right? They can't go into every individual nooks and crannies there, and that's where it's the job of the ecosystem and go in and fill that space and solve problems for merchants. And we knew that very far ahead of time. And we also knew where kind of the future was going here with the capabilities that we'd like to be able to offer. And that's where had already been preparing, and we had already niched down into a lot of these use cases, and then eventually building self-serve order editing as well on top of all of that. As API started to stabilize and as those capabilities started to become a lot more stable and readily available for merchants. I think overall the rollout for order editing happened, it was announced in 2019, but it really didn't roll out until around like 2021 or so. which is when we're finally able to kind of build some of these really big features on top of our platform.
The business during that time, during 2019 to 2021, went through like huge changes because on top of what Shopify was doing, we had this thing called COVID. And, not only we were in the office, and I don't know, I think we had like 6 people in the office at the time or so. There was like the whole uncertainty of running a business, having an office, not sure what this thing was going on, how long it was going to last. I don't even recall the first days. I think we all just went home and then like had to like figure it out. Just like, okay, everyone go home with their computers and then we'll just talk online through Slack or something like that. I'm sure like everyone else was dealing with. And we had to not only just deal with what was going on with Shopify and the actual business, but like how we communicated because we had regular stand ups. We had these like the way that we worked on things. We had note cards. We had whiteboards. We had all the typical office things that now we had to transition to some digital space, right? I think that's where very shortly after we picked up Mira. And then like throughout this time, like when we were just like getting full time, I was very relieved to be just in one business at the time. Honestly, I don't know how I would have run like 2 businesses remote, being able to focus on just not only like the product part of it, but the actual business part of it and how to navigate this new world and these new systems. So we were building not just that, but like the way that we work now actually came from that, which is we're full remotes. And, how did we get to like the ideal 4-day work week was at some point in time during COVID, like we really wanted to give everyone a break because people weren't really able to go outside to do things. We started with like every other Friday off. We said, hey, this seems doable. Everyone, like, I think it started in the summertime too when, it was nice out. And a lot of other companies kind of do this like half Friday on like the summers. And so we're like, why don't we just try like every other Friday? And so I think that started like 4 years before we decided to like hit some goals with the team. And we thought that if we hit these goals, then we could go to the full 4-day work week. As we thought about it too, it's like, hey, um, we've already done 2 days and like another 4 days, only another 2 days of the month. So we could do this. And like how we were able to do that was we shaved a lot of time being async when we were online, right? Like we had a lot of like formal meetings in the office that we removed um, to kind of help like us really focus down and get what we needed to get done in the 4-day work week. And one of the things I think that I would say overall, 100% the team is less burnt out. I can tell just like, everybody's a little slow on Mondays, but not to the degree that we used to have on Mondays. I definitely could see that. And I think that everyone knows that they just need to be more efficient um, because you got to get things done in 4 days versus 5. I feel like definitely at least for me, every hour of the 4 days like counts. Whereas like before, we went to a lot of coffees, to be honest, like when we were in the office and it's healthy to kind of be around and have conversations around the water cooler, but we do that anyway, like online. Sometimes it's informal where Andrew will just go, hey, I got this idea. Do you have 5 minutes? And if I have 5 minutes, I say yes. And we can just chat right then. Or if I don't, I can say, hey, I can talk to you at 1. We schedule something and that's how that goes. Right. And so I think that's pretty important the way that we were able to pivot really quickly to this digital, fully online company and remote allowed us to do some of these other things sooner than we had anticipated. We didn't really set a timeline for when we were going to be a 4-day work week company. It just transitioned to that in these small increments. And COVID just kind of helped accelerate that timeline a little. COVID was scary, but it helped us be more efficient as a business, surprisingly. I think like we took a lot of things that we had to adapt to quickly that we pretty much kept.
There are also a lot more things that COVID forced us to do as far as, say, documentation and staying on top of project management that, was potentially easier in person, but also harder in a lot of ways too. Because if you kind of recall what we used to do there when we are building a product, so we had all these like whiteboard drawings and like all these like index card. We had like we did the whole like postcards or index cards on the wall thing and everything. And it was really easy to lose track of that. And then also you would end up in these situations where you're like, okay, take a picture of the whiteboard and then what, right? Hopefully it gets posted somewhere and it's got to go on a Trello board or Asana or whatever. And then you'd forget about it too, or it's hard to read the whiteboard. And
Right.
so with all the new tooling that we did, it actually helped facilitate the way we like to work a lot better, which I like to call it like a workshop model, because we have strong visions for the product, the both of us, right? But we're also highly open and highly experimental. So we work with a lot of iterations, and it's really hard to do that when you have like things that are drawn on paper, right? Versus say when you're in like whiteboard tooling where you could just copy and paste something and then collaboratively work on that. In like our kind of workshop model, we don't spend a lot of time presupposing what the final vision and every little detail of a product is supposed to be or how it's supposed to feel. Instead, we start building really quickly, and then we actually are in the product like every day, clicking through it, checking everything. I kind of liken it to like being an artist in a workshop where you're all working on the same, say, massive sculpture or something, right? And it's our job to like basically walk through and make sure all the pieces are in proportion to each other, are going to fit together, and that the final product, once it all comes together, is what we want it to be, right? Then sometimes you're looking at, maybe a portion of what you're working on, and you think, actually, what, that's not going to work. It's not going to work the way that we expect it to. And that's when we can work together as a team to basically either decide if we're going to continue moving forward or on that part of it, or scrap it, try something else, try something completely different, or iterate on it as is. Right. And so there's lots of ways to manage a project, especially manage a software product. But this is the way that works for us. And this is the way that we've been building, I think a great product that takes a lot of UX consideration in order to get to where it had.
To add on that, kind of funny things in the office that we were doing that naturally segue to just working from home was when we had the office, it was an open space office, so we're all in the same room. And to be polite, we were always chatting on Slack anyway. If we wanted to talk to someone or if we wanted to go, hey, you got like 5 minutes, we wouldn't yell across the room and disrupt everyone, right? Like we would just be in Slack already going, hey, you want to chat or you want to go get coffee? I have like something to run by you. Outside of the whiteboards and the post-it notes, or if we wanted to work on something on the computer, I would drag my chair over to Andrew's computer and then stare at him like move things around, right? And while that was efficient, it was also not efficient because I too wanted to move things around. And it wasn't like we were passing like the mouse like back and forth. It was just like, okay, can you move it up or can you move it over? Super like inefficient. So when we ended up working on, even to today, we have like a standing coffee every week where we go and we have real FaceTime. But if we need to do something to hash out, sometimes we're like, all right, let's just go home and be on our separate computers because this is going to be way more efficient. Like you can move things around, I can move things around. I have an idea, I'll just make it and throw it onto the board. And it's like much quicker I think that we're both digital people and we work faster like on the computer than just hand drawing things. Like sometimes it's fun to hand draw things, but honestly, like if you're, talking about a button, like just copy the button, like move it around, right? No point in drawing that thing. So some of the ways we were working already naturally lended to being remote. And then other ways it was just like, man, I'm so happy. We're never going back to whiteboards. We're never going back to like index cards or post-its. Like it's so funny because I had a friend recently who showed me his gigantic whiteboard with all the post-its. And then I said, have you heard of Miro? That's all I thought. I was like, have you heard of doing this online? Because I will tell you right now, moving that thing around while it's a vision board is a nightmare. Like you're going to need to digitize all that, buddy, right? It's great for photo shoots, but it's actually pretty inefficient. Now, it may be fun for like some team building exercise, but we're a small team and we didn't need to kind of have that fluff. The vision for the business is to be really of service. Like we really truly want to help people. And that kind of defines like how we make decisions like, is this helpful? Does this provide like better value? It goes also aligns with how we feel about the people that work for us too. It's like we want not just to have like a great product, but we want to have this great environment as well. And like, what can we do to improve? What can we do to improve the workplace? Really reflects in the software. Like people design when they're happier. Customer service team works way better for customers when they're happy, right? Like those things are not like separate. We evolved to getting to a place where I feel very proud of what we have delivered, not just to the merchants, but to the people like our employees, right? They're able to live their lives and they are very happy to be here because we don't require their entire soul and 12 hours a day and all the other things that maybe someplace else would require. We have definitely shied away from the whole like, we are family. We know that everyone has their separate families and lives, and we encourage them to go do that, right? And going back to the business, we want to make things for efficient for merchants to grow and support their own families and their own communities and to be able to simplify things so that they can go do more important work or have less busy work or whatever version of it that they see fit. And also on the product side, we're really happy to be able to create a product that is flexible enough for people's different like business processes. We've noticed this over like the thousands and people that we've served is like, hey, you can do a lot of things and even surprise us with the product. Like people come up with ways they're using it that we're always very surprised. It's inspiring to us. Sometimes, we add it to our roadmap, and it's that also that constant dialogue with not only our team members but also our merchants.
I would say that like one of the things that being a bootstrapped company has allowed us to do, specifically a company that where we've actively made the decision that we will never take funding for the business, is that it allows us to think a lot more long term than you otherwise would be able to. We've been in the business for 10 years. We intend to be in the business for another 10 years rather than to just go around and jump to new things or look at the next shiny object. And part of that is our ethos for developing like really deep knowledge. You know, Tu and I both are deep knowledge types of people where we like to be really in, the topics and have a complete understanding. And I think we've also developed a team that is able to, for one, and also is also very interested in doing that as well. Just about everybody on our team has been with us for at least 4 years now, maybe five. And that's allowed them to develop this deep knowledge where, when problems arise now, somebody can look at it and say, oh, yeah, I know exactly where to go digging for the solution for this and how all that works. Right. It's a really, really big advantage, I think, in what we're able to do and how we're able to deliver. And at the end of the day, rather than having to chase the next goal for, in order to keep our investors happy and then continue the cycle of growth at all costs, what we're able to do is grow with the body of knowledge and also with the right merchants that we think kind of carry the vision with us. When I think about like where we are going, our app for the longest time has been not just like a sharp tool for merchants, but like a chainsaw. Like we always thought of it as a chainsaw where you can slice and dice orders any way that you want to slice and dice orders. And then also enable you to like, hey, if you wanted to, you could bite your own foot off if you needed. And like that's the type of power that we've always, try to build into the product, and that way merchants can serve their customers any way that they kind of need to. There's lots of ways to think about the category, I think, but I think at the end of the day, where we've really nailed down or like kind of come into is that this is a category, and our app is the type of app that really superpowers like your customer service team, right? And it gives them the type of extended capabilities and also the extended kind of support for your customer service team that allows the business to get outsized ROI compared to any other tool out there, right? Whether it's because of the self-serve order editing capabilities, or it's all the different ways that you can basically saw your own foot off, or a slice and dice really orders in the Shopify ecosystem. And that's, using really hard thought knowledge about how orders work and what you can do with orders. That's really just like tribal knowledge in the kind of API world of Shopify there, because there, of course, are all the things that is documented in Shopify, and then all the things that, of course, are not documented in Shopify. And we've had to learn every one of those things over the years, and it'll never stop too.
One of our visions for the future is that honestly, you'll see more of us because we've been pretty remiss in the last like 10 years of people not really knowing who we are because we don't share enough of not just what we do, but our knowledge. Right? We've had 10 years of doing this with the Shopify API in the system, and we've run across a lot of interesting use cases and a lot of different ways that people are using the app, little fun things that we never realized that you could actually do. And we don't share enough about that with people who probably would love to hear some of these answers, right? And it's because we're product people first. So, sharing isn't necessarily like our natural state, but I think that that's something that we want to improve moving forward is that we have 10 years of knowledge to share. We've run across a lot of issues that we know are solvable. And maybe like we said before, maybe we don't know exactly how to solve them, but we also have enough to point you in the right direction these days. And definitely being able to share some of that more publicly, I think, is one of the things that we'd want to improve this in the next few years. And we're product people. We've been doing the SaaS software Bootstrap for, I think now this is our 10-year anniversary, but maybe we can say slightly more than 10 years. And we have a lot to share, and we look forward to sharing that with the community. But with that, it also is like we would love feedback on like what you want to hear and also what topics you're interested in. We have a world of knowledge on, how to bootstrap something for 10 years, running a SaaS business, anything order editing or the API in Shopify in general. We've talked to quite a few number of brands in the space, and also, from even our history in before that in tech and also in the fashion world. We have a lot of knowledge that we surprise ourselves, and I think we need to share it more. So if you want to hear more about what we're doing, please check us out on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok, LinkedIn, what channels are hot today. I'm not sure, but those channels.
Is this where we ask them to? Is this where we ask them to, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell?
Do people still smash things?
So today we talked a lot about our customer service approach and how we think about serving our customers. I think next time, what do you say we go and talk about how we kind of develop this customer service ethos and where it came from? Because I know that for myself, I really cut my teeth on customer service when I worked at a pharmacy as a pharmacy technician in Montecito. And hey, if anybody wants to hear about this, I can tell you all about how one evening I locked Oprah out and told her she couldn't come in. So if you want to hear about that, just comment Oprah in the comments, subscribe, and follow for more. And we'll see you next time.
That sounds great, Andrew. So until next time, bye, Andrew.
See you too.